morning and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name's Karen Skiles and I'm pleased to be your host for today's webinar. We've been delivering our monthly webcations to you since 2007 and we're very happy to see so many of you joining us again for today's webinar. We're pleased to have Donna Knapp, Curriculum Development Manager at ITSM Academy, with us today. Donna's presentation is titled State of IT Service Management and DevOps for 2018. You can download the slides directly from the link in the chat box or from our website at www.itsmacademy.com/webinar-archives. We'll be tweeting during this presentation. If you'd like to join in, please use hashtag AskITSM. Again, we've got a few polling questions this morning to help Donna learn a little bit more about our listeners today. So let's start with the first.
And Karen.
Hi, Donna.
Karen, I'm not going to do all the polling questions initially. So
okay.
If you like, I can drive the polling questions.
Okay, perfect.
All right. So I'm just going to ask a couple initially, and then we'll ask a couple kind of as we go along. So here we go. First poll. What are your current service management priorities? This is an ITSM and DevOps webinar after all, so let's start off talking about service management. And you can actually select multiple options if there are multiple that apply to you. So it is possible to have see all of the above in this particular poll.
We have those, but we do today.
Yeah.
Right?
All right. Excellent. Thank you. I'm going to close the poll. And I'll share out. So a lot of you are streamlining and re-engineering your processes. Kind of no surprise there. We've been seeing lots of folks in our classes that are focused on process design improvement. So automating and improving customer experience kind of come in very, very close to next. Self-service, certainly, and then enabling enterprise service management. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens when we do this presentation in, next year, to see if that enabling enterprise service management bumps up a little bit. All right, so I'm going to close that one. I'm going to do one more, and then I'm going to get rolling. How familiar are you with VeriSM?
I just have you to introduce. This is my favorite part.
Okay, go for it.
Donna has over 25 years of IT industry experience working as a practitioner, consultant, and a trainer, and is known for her engaging and informative speaking style. Her certifications include ITIL Expert, ITIL Practitioner, Certified Process Design Engineer, Certified Agile Service Manager, Certified Agile Process Owner, Certified Scrum Master, DevOps Foundation, DevOps Leader, DevOps Test Engineer, VeriSM Foundation, and KCS Principles. She is the author of A Guide to Service Desk Concepts, 4th edition, A Guide to Customer Service Skills for Service Desk Professionals, 4th edition, and the ITSM Process Design Guide. And good morning, Donna.
Hello. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. Great. It's always fun to see lots of my friends out there and some new names and faces. So we're going to go ahead and get rolling. There's my smiling face for you. So we're going to talk about the state of ITSM and DevOps, and we're going to really also talk about how they're very much coming together in 2018. So I'm going to get rolling. Karen talked about ITSM Academy and what we do. You can see my credentials on the right-hand side. I always like to just say I'm a lifelong learner. I love learning about new things. I love having a broad base of knowledge, and very much I love being able to share it with all of you. So thanks everyone for participating. And are we sharing my screen? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Excellent. All right, so here we go. So if you've read anything about anything in the IT industry lately, this word transformation has come up. Transformations are underway in a lot of different shapes and forms. Digital transformation, of course, being the most prevalent that we're hearing about, but lots of technology transformation underway, from the technologies that underpin DevOps practices to technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning that are really starting to come into the mainstream. Certainly, we saw the agile transformation, and that really started many years ago. The Agile Manifesto, I think, is close to 15 years old now, if not more. But as with anything, we're still seeing organizations that are new to Agile, that are just coming to Agile. The same can be said for DevOps. The Agile transformation really paved the way for DevOps as organizations started to take a more iterative and incremental approach to software development. They found that they needed to have that more iterative and incremental approach on the ops side of their organization as well. DevOps does have very specific practices that are really starting to mature. I've had some people say, well, we've been doing DevOps for a lot of years, and I think that's awesome if what that means is your DevOps, parts of your organization have been collaborating effectively, and if you've been really looking to kind of have a good, clean flow of work across your value stream. There are automation practices and technological practices that have emerged in the last 5 to 10 years and are really now just starting to mature, that are making DevOps today different than what you may think it is. So a lot going on in that arena. Service management transformation certainly is underway, and that's what prompted one of my polling questions, which was, are you working on elevating service management to an enterprise level? We're really starting to see the IT being dropped from in front of IT service management, and very much in the context of the digital transformation, organizations recognizing that service management practices really are required across our organizations, especially as we introduce digital services that more and more are coming in and touching all those different parts of our organization. And all of this really in the end translates to cultural transformation. And so we're really seeing, and you can see the definition of transformation now, we're seeing some really profound and some really radical changes underway within the IT industry. It's really, I think, quite an interesting and exciting time to be working in the IT industry. But having said that, it's not without its pressures. Here's the reality of what the business wants today. I call it like the moment. The business wants it all. They want speed. They want to be able to change on a dime based on market pressures or consumer requirements. They want everybody in the organization and their consumers being as productive as possible. They want stability. They want quality. Really, we cannot in this day and age get away with, speed at the detriment of quality. And we need to deliver it all. And that historically has been a challenge for organizations, especially very, very siloed IT organizations. So it's a challenging time. So what we have to think about is the fact that these changes are really requiring us to think differently and to work differently. And you can see the quote here. In order to balance quality and speed, we need for people within organizations to change their mindset, the way they think, and their operating principles, the way they work, how they go about doing their work. And both ITSM and DevOps are very much being impacted by this requirement that we change how we think and how we work. So let's start off by talking about IT service management. IT service management is really critical to a digital transformation. As we start to provide digital services, the need to have reliable, high quality, stable services is imperative. Who cares if you have really cool features and you're quickly putting out the latest and the greatest, but those features and that functionality is residing on an unstable platform. So executives, and you can see the stats here, have really come to recognize how important IT service management is, not only in the context of traditional IT service management, but very much in the context of some of our progressive practices like Agile and DevOps. So, okay, but what does that mean? Well, what we as ITSM professionals need to recognize today is the what and the why of IT service management hasn't changed, and it isn't going to change anytime soon. We still, when we're looking at managing changes, need to think about minimizing the risk and impact associated with that change. When we're talking about incidents, we need to restore service as quickly as possible. When we're talking about problems, we're still going to ask the question why, right? We still want to understand, why are we seeing these problems within our organization? It's the how we go about executing these processes that very much needs to change. We have to speed up. Historically in IT, and this isn't based on ITIL guidance. This is based on just how we've seen IT service management implemented in some organizations. Processes have been a little more heavyweight than perhaps they need to be, or than they can be in order for us to work effectively in this day and age. So we've got to streamline those processes. We've got to speed them up. We need to understand that IT service management by definition is an integrated set of processes, and we need to understand how one process works with another process. We can't have process silos, just like we can't have functional silos in our organizations and expect to be successful today. And we also have to think about automating. So Agile, Lean, DevOps have all introduced new ways of thinking. And IT service management can use those same new ways of thinking and working in order to adapt our IT service management processes. So to that point, ITIL is evolving. If you aren't already aware, there is an initiative underway to update the ITIL framework. It's actually been underway for close to a couple of years now. They've been doing a lot of research, reaching out to a lot of individuals and organizations in order to do research and better understand how to update ITIL. Now, we've been already kind of getting a sneak peek into the updated ITIL guidance. So if you're familiar with ITIL practitioner guidance, if you've attended, whether you've purchased the publication or you've attended an ITIL practitioner course, the 9 guiding principles that were introduced in ITIL practitioner, the core competencies that were introduced in ITIL practitioner are very much going to carry forward into the new release of ITIL. They play a really central and really critical role in ITIL. If you actually look at the 9 guiding principles, and if you're not familiar with them, you can Google right now, ITIL 9 guiding principles, and you can see what the 9 guiding principles are. The 9 guiding principles, if you really sit and look at them, really embrace Agile, Lean, DevOps, right? You see those core guiding principles represented. There also have been white papers that have been introduced. ITIL and DevOps Getting Started is an example of one that's available now. Those white papers have started to introduce the material that is going to comprise this refreshed version of ITIL. So that's going to continue. We're going to continue to see them, and I'm going to use the word leaking for lack of a better term, but we're going to start to see them leaking some drafts of the new guidance and introduce little pieces of the guidance throughout this year. And they're going to start to pull it again in the latter part of the year by doing some pilots to really start to introduce the guidance, and most importantly, get feedback on the guidance. So one of the things that's really different this time around is that they're not going to kind of live off in a corner somewhere, or they're already not living off in a corner, right? They're already engaging the community significantly. the guidance is being introduced in increments so that they can get feedback and continuously improve that guidance before we see publications. Whereas in the past, you know, it's like we didn't hear about it until there were books on our doorstep. So if you want to learn more about the Global Research Program and actually participate in providing feedback, I've provided a website for you on the screen, axelos.com, global-itsm-research.program, spelled the British way versus the American way. And that can kind of let you get on the list of people who can get, they're publishing newsletters periodically, and they're gonna start putting out drafts of some of the information. So a big part of what we're gonna see with this update is the that integration between ITIL and Agile and Lean and DevOps, and that very much recognition that IT service management has to evolve in line with what's going on in the industry. Now, I'm sure some of you are sitting there thinking, what does this mean to my certifications? So here's what we know. And I actually had a meeting with Axelos yesterday to get kind of direct from the source, the latest information. The content itself is going to be backwards compatible. The core elements are going to remain intact. So we're going to still call incidents incidents. We're still going to call problems problems, right? Those core concepts are going to remain the same. Any current certifications are going to retain their value as of this moment, and it could change. I think it's not likely, but it could change. There's not going to be a big bridge certification, you know, a big bridging effort that like we saw with V2 and V3. So as of this moment, no need to bridge, no need to recertify. Every existing certification that you hold today is still going to be relevant as we go forward. In Q2 of 2018, we are going to see a new certification scheme. It's going to be a simpler scheme than what we have today. And in that certification scheme, there are going to be equivalencies. So it's going to be very clear to you if you hold, you know, ITIL RCV as an example. It's going to be very clear to you what the equivalency to ITIL RCV is in the new certification scheme. Every existing certification will have an equivalency in the new scheme. So it's really important to understand that your investment in ITIL education is being protected as we move forward with the new scheme. Stay the course, continue on your journey. You know, I know at times like this, there's the tendency to say, well, should I stop? Should I not? Should I wait? The reality is everything that you've done and you will do up until the point that new education is available will continue to be relevant. ITIL practitioner plays a really important role in the new qualification scheme, the ITIL practitioner concepts. And so if you've been thinking, should I take ITIL practitioner, should I not? It's very, very relevant. It will serve you very, very well moving forward. And ITIL expert absolutely will be an advantage as you move forward into the new qualification scheme. So I hope that kind of alleviates any concerns that anybody's been having, or kind of busts any rumors that you've been hearing about you're going to have to retake all your certifications. You're not. Everything is going to carry forward. There's going to be clear, a clear understanding of what you've invested in up until now, what the relevant equivalency is. You're not going to have to recertify. You're not going to have to bridge. We're just evolving, right? It's continuous improvement at its finest, and that's an exciting thing. ITIL preaches continuous service improvement, so it's very, very exciting to me when we see ITIL improving and evolving as well. Now, one of the questions I asked you is, how familiar are you with VeriSM? We actually have seen the introduction of a new framework, VeriSM, and 72% of you said not familiar with VeriSM. So I'm excited to share this information with you. So what is VeriSM? There's a couple of kind of key words that I want to emphasize in this particular definition. VeriSM is a service management approach. Notice there's no IT in front of that concept. VeriSM really looks to elevate service management to an organizational level. It acknowledges that good service management practices are critical across the organization, whether you work in IT or HR or your sales and your marketing department. You know, today, especially with digital transformation, any part of an organization on any given day can have contact with the customers of that company. So we all need to have a good understanding of service management principles. It is an approach. So it's not a methodology, it's not a framework. We're not going to apply any of those typical terms. It's an approach for the digital age. So it very much recognizes the digital transformation and how emerging technologies and progressive practices like Agile, like DevOps, are really changing the way organizations are working, and the expectations that our consumers have relative to the services that we're providing. And what it does is help service providers create a flexible operating model to meet desired business outcomes. So it's not a process framework. I really want to emphasize that. It actually doesn't introduce any processes. I've been already hearing that VeriSM is replacing ITIL. It's an apple and an orange. VeriSM does not introduce processes, so it's not going to replace ITIL. In fact, it very much acknowledges the role of ITIL within organizations. So if you want to learn more, a good place to go is verism.global. That's the kind of definitive site that you can go to. They have a great video to learn more about it. What VeriSM does is say, look, we realize that in your organizations, you've made a lot of investments. You've invested in DevOps, you've invested in IT service management, you've invested in ITIL. And oh, by the way, there's all these new technologies coming our way, cloud, big data, automation, right? The Internet of Things. There's all these things going on within our organizations. So how do we make sense of that? And that's what VeriSM does. It kind of helps you make sense of all these things that are going on in your organization and pull them together in a way that makes sense for your organization. And what's really important to understand is that for some of your organizations, you may say, you know what, Agile is not relevant to us, or big data is not relevant to us, and that's okay, right? Your operating model is going to look different than an organization that very much is already investing in, you know, those practices or those technologies. So what VeriSM does is really help organizations to define their service management principles, to and notice, hope you've already heard that word principle come up a couple of times, right? Those guiding principles. Define your service management principles and really develop an operating model that's going to work for your organization. And an important, again, premise that I want to emphasize is it's really service management at the organizational level. It's not IT service management. It's really at an organizational level. So you might have been sitting there thinking, does VeriSM stand for something? Yes, actually it does. So VeriSM stands for value-driven, evolving, responsive, integrated service management. And I think those words, evolving and responsive, are so powerful today. Recognizing the fact that things are changing fast. All of the practices that we use have to evolve as well. So I think it's important to accept that, you know, it's awesome that ITIL's evolving. It's awesome that we're seeing new frameworks being introduced, new approaches being introduced. You know, we have to, in this day and age, constantly be reinventing the way we approach service management. But that doesn't mean we throw out the old, you know, it's never in this day and age going to be, okay, stop what you're doing, you know, stop doing ITIL and now start doing VeriSM. It's not that way at all. It's really understanding that this is an evolution, and all of these approaches and all of these frameworks and all of these standards have a role to play in your organization or not, right? In some of your organizations, some of these concepts may not be relevant. So if we look at what VeriSM introduces, it challenges organizations to first of all start with an understanding of governance at the highest levels of the organization. And we know this. We know that in some of your industries, you're heavily regulated. There's lots of legal requirements that you have to satisfy. In some of your organizations, perhaps not so much. So you really have to look at governance from the standpoint of your organization, who your stakeholders are, who you have to answer to within your organization, and what rules and guardrails you need to put in place within your organization to make sure that you're doing things the right way. We then introduce service management principles. So service management principles I see as the way we think, right? So, you know, if you look at the ITIL 9 guiding principles, we're going to, you know, progress iteratively. We're going to observe directly. We're going to focus on value. So what are the core principles that are going to serve as the guardrails within your organization? How and really, how can we influence the way we think? And that's really what those principles are all about. And then we see the operating model. And you're very familiar with these concepts. You might not necessarily be familiar with these terms yet. You'll be becoming more familiar, but we know what this life cycle looks like. We're defining our consumer requirements. We're producing our products and services. So we're building, we're testing, we're implementing our products and services. We're providing them in our live production environment, right? So we're managing changes to those environments. We're monitoring the availability, the capacity, the continuity, the security, right? Those core premises are still very much intact in the VeriSM model. They are very much recognized as a capability. Again, VeriSM doesn't introduce processes as ITIL does for managing availability, for managing capacity, but what VeriSM does do is acknowledge that you need to have this capability. And then respond really speaks to how we're handling issues, how we're handling requests, how we're handling problems within our environment, what VeriSM refers to as source events. And then making sure that we're always capturing consumer feedback. So we're verifying that they're satisfied with our services. We're looking constantly at how we can improve. And last but not least, a core concept that's introduced in VeriSM is this concept of the management mesh. And I think this management mesh is really the most exciting part about VeriSM, because what it does is acknowledge that, again, you have you've made investments. Perhaps you've invested in ITIL. Perhaps you've invested in Agile or Lean or DevOps. Let's acknowledge that there are a lot of different frameworks. There are a lot of different methodologies out there. We've got project and portfolio management. For some of you, perhaps we have SIAM that we've invested in. Some of you may have actually gone to achieving ISO 20,000 or 27,000 certification. IT for IT is certainly emerging. CMMI has been around for a long time, right? So let's recognize that we've made investments in these practices, or perhaps we should make investments in these practices in order to continuously improve, in order to achieve, right, and support our principles, and in order to achieve the governance requirements that have been put in place for our organization. Let's think about these practices in the context of our current environment, right? And every company's environment is different depending on things like your culture, your competition, you know, the regulatory controls you have to answer to, the resources that you have available to you, and certainly the emerging technologies that you're utilizing within your organization or that are impacting your industry. And so you need to think about how to leverage. So the mesh says, let's understand that for every organization, there's no one-size-fits-all approach. In fact, from one product or service to another within your organization, there may be a different approach that you take. So you may have some legacy applications, for example, where you're not really leveraging Agile service management or Agile practices. Perhaps you're taking traditional project management approach. And so maybe for that particular service, DevOps isn't applicable. Conversely, right? You've got, you know, something where you're taking a very agile approach, and so DevOps very much comes into play, so we can continuously deliver and deploy those new services. So there is a certification scheme associated with VeriSM. Currently, the courses that are available are these foundational level courses: VeriSM Essentials, VeriSM Foundation, and VeriSM Plus. And there's a couple ways that you can navigate your way through this certification scheme. So, sorry, I had to cough there. So one is to take VeriSM Foundation. And I want to mention that VeriSM Foundation is really a combination of VeriSM Essentials, which introduces service management essential concepts, what it looks like to be a service organization, how to introduce a service culture into your organization, and VeriSM Plus really looks at the progressive practices that we're seeing organizations introduce, emerging technologies. So Foundation is really, you know, Essentials and Plus combined together into a single certification. In the classroom environment, it looks like a 2-day course where you cover both the Essentials and the Plus concepts. You could also split up Essentials and Plus. So for some of you that are new to service management, you might want to start out just taking Essentials and really learn about what it looks like to be a service organization, and go back and start to introduce some of those concepts in your organization, and come back at a later time and take VeriSM Plus to learn more about the progressive practices and the emerging technologies. So even if you split these two courses up, at the end of the day, it's going to lead you to a VeriSM Foundation certification. Now, for those of you, and I know a lot of you out there fit into this camp, for those of you who have an existing, and that means kind of you hold a certification in service management. So this might be an ITIL Foundation certification, ISO 20K certification, IT for IT certification. If you hold an existing certification, you can go straight to VeriSM Plus, and you can learn about those emerging practices and those emerging technologies. And again, taking and passing the VeriSM Plus certification exam will lead you to VeriSM Foundation certification. Now, just to give you like a little bit of a different visual image, there is overlap here, right? So you can see with VeriSM Essentials, the focus is really on this concept of service and, you know, service management, service culture, the characteristics of a service organization. And just a brief introduction to the VeriSM model. You're going to see with Plus much more of a focus on VeriSM. It's very much assumed that in your previous certification, you got some kind of exposure to what a service management, what a service culture looks like. So whether it was, again, ITIL or ISO or IT for IT, you're really now going to focus on the model itself, the management mesh, the progressive practices, and the innovative technologies. And if you look to attend the foundation course, you're going to get those two courses, Essential and Plus, kind of pulled together into a single course that lets you really kind of, you know, refresh perhaps your understanding of service and service management, and again, learn about the VeriSM model itself. So we've got ITIL being refreshed. We've got VeriSM coming our way. We've got, and you're going to learn more about both of those at our conferences that a lot of us attend, be it HDI, Knowledge, ITSM Fusion. I did want to mention that there's actually a new conference also being introduced this year, Service Management World. And the emphasis here is going to be on enterprise service management and digital transformation. So here you start to see these concepts very much starting to come together. And we're going to hear these new concepts really coming into play. And then, of course, the DevOps Enterprise Summit. So let's talk about DevOps. If you're not familiar with the definition of DevOps, it's there in your presentation for you. The reality is that DevOps is 10 years old now, or very, very close to being 10 years old. It has been historically primarily something that we found in startup organizations or unicorn organizations, the Googles, the Facebooks, right? Those big organizations that are leading the way. You can see from these statistics that every analyst out there is emphasizing the fact that DevOps has found its way into the enterprise. Forrester, in fact, is predicting that 2018 will be the year of enterprise DevOps. For organizations that have gone to the cloud, we're already seeing a very high percentage of those organizations adopting some aspect of DevOps principles. And IDC really is saying that, you know, a very high percentage of organizations by 2019 are going to be adopting DevOps. It's really becoming a critical set of practices for organizations that want to be competitive, that really understand how important speech market is in today's consumer-driven environment. And part of what's driving DevOps into the enterprise is the fact that the stats are pretty compelling. When you look at the State of DevOps report, high-performing organizations are performing significantly better than their lower-performing counterparts, than those organizations who haven't introduced DevOps practices like continuous integration, continuous testing, continuous delivery, continuous deployment, continuous monitoring. Note the continuous word there. And, you know, who have not put in place an integrated tool chain that flows across their entire IT value stream. And it's interesting, and I say this every year, but I'm going to say it again. If you are new to DevOps, go back and look at previous State of DevOps reports. So the first State of DevOps report was introduced in 2014. Go read the 2014, the 2015, the 2016, and the 2017. You actually see the evolution of DevOps practices, and you also see how organizations have matured. So once organizations have mastered certain basic practices, how they then have evolved on to a new set of practices. So you get to have some insight into what the highest performing organizations are doing. You also get some insight into what separates the low performers from the high performers. So here's an example. In 2017, we saw low performing organizations make improvements in terms of agility. We saw them start to deploy code more quickly, right? We started to see more frequent deployments in those organizations. So that's great. Here's the bad news. What they did not see is an improvement in stability. In fact, things got worse. So they saw more failures because of the complexity of the changes. The recovery times were taking longer. So in those organizations that focused only on speed, they really actually saw a negative impact on their business because stability of the environment was impacted. And remember where we started this journey, the business wants it all, right? So that's really not acceptable in this day and age. What's really different about DevOps and the DevOps practices and technologies is that you don't have to sacrifice one for the other. You really can have it all. So where are we with DevOps? Well, you can read these barriers these trends for DevOps. No surprise that culture sits at the top of the list. In organizations that have really looked at DevOps as perhaps a set of technologies that we need to introduce, or that have introduced DevOps in a silo, we see in some organizations where DevOps got introduced in the dev side of the house without actually talking to the ops side of the house, which is, hello, kind of counter to what the movement's really all about. It's no surprise then, right? The culture rises to the top as one of the great barriers that organizations are seeing. And certainly there's complexities in terms of, being able to, there's some requirements in terms of re-architecting our applications, and that's where tackling legacy comes into play, the skill sets that are needed to understand these practices. And certainly for some organizations, just making the investment or getting the buy-in is a challenge. So that kind of takes me, and we're going to do this kind of really quickly, just so everybody can kind of relate to what's going on in their particular organizations. So very, very quickly, I'm going to take about 10 seconds. What challenges are currently impacting your DevOps initiatives in your organizations? All right, we've got just about 70% have voted. So you all are very in a very similar situation, right, to what was found in this particular Forbes study. For a lot of you, culture, 63%, that siloed culture is what's affecting your DevOps initiative. Notice 27% of you, heavyweight ITSM processes, right? That lack of a plan. Certainly legacy is a big part of it. And legacy and modern technologies and budget, very much go hand in hand. So you very much kind of mirror what's going on in organizations today, right? This group is very much representative of what we're seeing across the industry. So what's going to happen in 2018 and beyond? First of all, DevOps is going to start to scale. In a lot of organizations, DevOps has been introduced as a pilot, maybe relative to one particular application, maybe only within the dev side of the house, and ops really hasn't been engaged in the initiative. Security hasn't been engaged in the initiative. In order to scale DevOps across enterprises, organizations very much recognize that they have to, first of all, start with a common understanding of what DevOps is, start to educate people on what these practices are all about, and get everybody engaged, right? We are going to see DevSecOps gain acceptance in 2018. There's very much recognition, and the gentleman who coined the term DevOps kind of rused the day that that term became popular, because he indicates it's just not inclusive enough. It should really be like biz, dev, QA, sec, ops, right? And if anybody else that got forgotten along the way. Certainly manual testing is going to become obsolete. Testers must become coders. Testing must become continuous. We're going to see the SRE, site reliability engineer role, start to emerge. Site reliability engineering is really using engineering practices to maintain reliability and the stability of our production environment, to handle incidents, to handle problems, right? So taking very much an engineering and automation and engineering approach to that. Again, we're going to very much come to understand that you can't sacrifice stability for speed. We have to give it all. But we also have to recognize that we can't do what we've been doing historically, and that is slowing down change in order to, ensure the stability of our environment. We have to learn to experiment. We have to learn to rethink how we're looking at risk. We have to understand that there are things that are inherent, practices that are inherent in DevOps that, when done correctly, actually minimize risk significantly. And our ITSM processes have to evolve accordingly. So change management, for example, has to respect the fact that DevOps is doing some great stuff in order to minimize risk. And so we don't have to have every change go in front of the cab. for example. So let's understand that DevOps really got created in isolation in a lot of organizations, despite the fact that it's about breaking down silos. In a lot of organizations, there is now a DevOps silo. So what really has to happen is that service management has to adapt, and service management can play a really important role in terms of making sure that we understand across our organization, right, how to achieve that speed and that stability. Service management can become the enabler, right, that helps us do it all. So here's the reality of DevOps. Even though DevOps practitioners sometimes like to kind of pretend that we don't need no stinking processes, the reality is DevOps practitioners are doing IT service management. They're making changes, they're handling incidents, they're handling problems, they're capturing knowledge, right? All those things that we know about IT service management. They're just not calling it that. They're introducing new ways of thinking and working, and IT service management has to learn from DevOps and adapt accordingly. And here's really important, here's where Agile Service Management can play a really important role. So Agile Service Management, I see some of you out there are certified Agile Service Managers or certified Agile Process Owners. Agile Service Management helps us to design and improve our processes in an iterative and incremental way to make sure that our processes are Agile processes. So bringing all of these concepts together is really going to enable us to continuously improve within our organizations. Again, there's no throwing out the old way of doing things and starting all over with some new way. Just start today, making things better. We also have to recognize that technology is really changing the game here. I could spend 45 minutes just talking about all of these different technologies, right? But you're reading about these technologies and you understand that these concepts are really changing the game. Artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, robotic process automation. I actually went to a conference earlier this week for the training industry. So not necessarily the IT industry, but for trainers about how to become better trainers. And concepts like augmented intelligence and robotic process automation were really relevant topics up there because they were talking about how can we change education, right? How can we augment education by letting computers help us do some of the heavy lifting? And we all certainly understand this idea that in this day and age, you know, we used to say there's an app for that. Now we say there's a bot for that, right? So we're really starting to see these technologies change the game. And when we talk about self-service portals, which is a concept that we've actually been talking about for a long time in IT service management, let's understand that we're now talking about enterprise self-service portals, right? We're elevating service management up to that enterprise level. So understand that these emerging technologies can really be applied in a lot of ways, whether it's by using bots in order to help us in terms of handling calls or handling emails. And I'm sure most of you have used this technology at this point. I know I personally, if they offer me a chat, I'm there, right? As opposed to getting on the phone and calling. And I recognize the fact that on any given day, that chat is being responded to by a bot as opposed to by a human being. We also can use artificial intelligence, machine learning in order to improve and automate our IT service management processes. So you're seeing problem management, for example, really pave the way in terms of using technology in order to understand what's happening. Predictive analytics come into play here very much. How can we proactively prevent things from going wrong as opposed to just waiting for something to go wrong and then have a human being address it? And I have to say that more and more I'm seeing this term augmentation come into play, that really, while all the hype is around artificial intelligence, today it's augmented intelligence that's going to help us. It's understanding that we can use computers to help us do our work more efficiently, more effectively, perhaps even automate some of our routine tasks for us, so we can kind of get on with innovating and doing things that are really going to benefit the business. We also have to, and I think IT service management professionals have to keep emphasizing this, understand that there's a lot of data. There's a really heavily reliance on knowledge bases. You know, those computers don't just wake up in the morning and know how to do things. Look at the statistic. Through 2020, 99% of artificial intelligence initiatives in IT service management will fail due to a lack of established knowledge management. So those of you who are involved in knowledge management initiatives know that what you are doing today is very, very important. The knowledge management process is evolving significantly, and a lot of that is to support artificial intelligence, machine learning, and these emerging technologies are really impacting the service desk today. So we're starting to see very much a shift left from assisted service to self-service to self-healing. You know, a big premise of the Internet of Things is that a lot of these devices are going to be able to fix themselves, and if they can't, they're going to be able to automatically come in and seek help from the organization. So understand that, you know, initially it's going to look like using machine learning and just using that type of capability in order to free up our human beings so that they can be working on all the back end stuff that has to happen for this type of shift left activity to be successful. But we're heading to this notion of virtual customer assistants, and you can see the stat by Gartner, right? We're going to see those virtual assistants really come into play as we go forward. So what does that mean to our existing service desk? Our existing service desk is really going to move to much more of an advisor role. The service desk of the future may be actually embedded in business units so that they very much understand the needs of that business unit and can really be much more of a hands-on assistant to help people understand how to use technology to be productive, as opposed to what traditionally the service desk has been all about and what the help desk was all about, and that is break fix. So we're really seeing this service desk role evolve. It means some really interesting job opportunities for people who are working in this industry today who can combine great customer service skills with an understanding of how to use technology to benefit the business. So it's absolutely impacting our industry, but I'm going to let Gartner kind of say it for me. You know, there's all kinds of stats out there about how artificial intelligence is going to result in job loss, but this has happened before, where we've seen some kind of a transformation in an industry, and it has resulted in job loss. But the jobs that have been lost have been lower entry jobs, have been jobs where maybe what we're doing is having a human being do things that technology can do, or a human being answer FAQs when a bot can do that. But what's going to emerge are more interesting jobs, right? Higher level jobs that require greater skill and provide greater opportunity for individuals within the organization. So if you're out there today in IT, what you really have to understand is the future's here, right? And it needs leaders. It needs people who are out there learning about these new technologies, learning about these new frameworks, looking at how we can go from where we are today. And the way we go there is by starting now, by starting where we are, by just progressing iteratively, right? To benefit the business, to enable the business to excel based on all these cool new technologies that are now available to us. So embrace these new ways of working, embrace these new technologies, figure out how they can augment your work, right? And free you up to really think about how IT can innovate, how IT can better benefit the business today.
ITSM Academy is a full-service provider of IT service management education. We develop all content in-house. That includes all ITIL education as well as process design, Agile, and DevOps. Since 2003, we've trained and certified tens of thousands of students. At ITSM Academy, we believe that one of our important roles in the industry is to help organizations get buy-in for their IT service management programs. To assist you in your efforts, we are offering this webinar and many of our previous webinars to you and your team in a virtual environment at no charge. There's no selling involved. It's just our way of reaching out to the community to help organizations such as yourselves with your IT service management programs. So if you're interested in having us deliver this for you, just get in touch with me. You can email us at info@itsmacademy.com.